Commander Vexler's massive form dominated the war chamber as he faced the High Council. His scaled skin had lost its once brilliant purple hue, now dulled to a sickly gray. The 4 ceremonial scars across his chest, marks of his countless victories, seemed to mock him now. Around the circular chamber, dozens of Krillian nobles leaned forward in their floating seats, their compound eyes reflecting the chamber's dim lighting. Honored counselors, Vexler's voice cracked like breaking stone. 50 cycles I have served this empire. 50 cycles of conquest across the void, but nothing prepared me for the humans. The chamber's silence was absolute. Even the usual whispers of political scheming had died away. Supreme Chancellor Crixinth gestured with one of her 6 arms for him to continue. Vexler's mind drifted back to that fateful day when their long-range scouts had detected the blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. The planet teemed with life, and initial scans showed a species that had barely begun to explore their own solar system. Their technology was laughably primitive: chemical rockets, nuclear weapons, basic electronics, the perfect target for expansion. The fleet assembled at the edge of their system, Vexler recalled, his voice growing stronger. 200 vessels, each one capable of glassing a planet, Admiral Zixtel commanded from the flagship Void Render. We had conquered the insectoid Zephyrians with half that force. The approach had been textbook. Krillian dreadnoughts, their hulls gleaming like black mirrors, emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Each ship stretched over a kilometer in length, bristling with plasma cannons and energy projectors. The humans had primitive satellites orbiting their world-crude metal constructs that served as their early warning system. Their first response was almost amusing, Vexler continued, a bitter laugh escaping his throat. They launched missiles at us. Chemical-propelled warheads that couldn't even penetrate our deflector screens. The weapons simply dissolved against our energy barriers like raindrops on a window. But the humans didn't stop. Even as their missiles proved useless, they kept firing. Wave after wave of rockets streaked up from the planet's surface, each one modified slightly from the last. Some carried electromagnetic pulses, others delivered nuclear payloads, and a few seemed designed purely for reconnaissance. We thought. They were panicking, Vexler admitted, throwing everything they had at us in desperation. How could we know they were studying us? The bombardment began at dawn over the human city they called Sol. Plasma beams lanced down from orbit, turning skyscrapers to vapor and melting streets into glass. The humans scattered exactly as expected, their flying vehicles fleeing in all directions. Ground forces evacuated in orderly columns, their military units covering the retreat. It was during the 3rd day of bombing that I first saw her, Vexler's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Hannah. She was leading a group of human soldiers through the ruins of their capital when our drop pods landed. The Krillian assault troops had expected resistance, but the humans fought with a ferocity that surprised even seasoned warriors. They used their environment brilliantly, turning rubble into cover and collapsed buildings into ambush points. Their weapons failed to penetrate Krillian armor. They improvised explosives from civilian materials. But it wasn't their fighting that unnerved me, Vexler explained. It was how they fought. Every engagement, every skirmish, they were recording everything. Even as they retreated, they were taking readings of our weapons, our armor, our tactics. But the capture of Hannah had been almost anticlimactic. Her unit had run out of ammunition while defending an evacuation point. Instead of fighting to the death like so many other species, she had simply laid down her weapons and waited. When Krillian troops surrounded her, she didn't try to escape or beg for mercy. I interrogated her personally, Vexler said, his 4 arms unconsciously mimicking the memory. She sat in that containment cell, staring at the force field generator, at the guards' equipment, at everything. When I asked her questions about human defenses, she answered truthfully. Too truthfully. Should have been the first warning sign. Captured leaders usually lied or stayed silent or tried to mislead their captors. But Hannah had provided accurate information about human military capabilities, population centers, and industrial capacity. She had even drawn detailed maps of their underground bunker systems. I thought she was broken, Vexler continued. But every time I looked into her eyes, I saw something else. She was cataloging everything: our speech patterns, our technology, our procedures. She was turning her own capture into a learning opportunity. The conquest of Earth had proceeded exactly according to plan. Within 30 days, major human cities had fallen. Their governments had collapsed and their military had been scattered. Admiral Zixtal had transmitted victory reports back too. The homeworld and the noble houses had begun planning the division of human territory. We celebrated in the conquered human cities. Vexther's voice grew heavy with regret. We flew our banners from their tallest buildings. We thought we had won another glorious victory for the Empire. The humans seemed to accept their fate with unusual grace. They followed our orders, provided labor for our occupation forces, and didn't attempt any major uprisings. But Commander Vexther had noticed small things. Human workers in the plasma foundries asked too many questions about the technology. Human translators spent extra time studying Krillian technical manuals. Human civilians seemed unusually interested in watching Krillian military drills. The signs were there, he admitted to the council. But we were too arrogant to see them. We had never encountered a species that treated defeat as education. Every other race we conquered either submitted completely or fought until extinction. The humans did neither. The final image that haunted Vexther was of Hannah's last day in captivity. As part of a prisoner exchange, she was being returned to the human resistance. But as she walked toward the transport, she had turned back to look at him one final time. There was no hatred in her eyes, no fear, no defeat. There was only the cold calculation of a predator studying its prey. That look, Vexther whispered to the silent chamber, should have told me everything. We hadn't captured their leader. We had given their greatest strategist a graduate course in Krillian warfare, and she had been an excellent student. 6 months after the initial conquest, Vexther stood in the command center of the orbital station above Earth, watching sensor readings that made no sense. The holographic displays showed human settlements across 3 star systems, all apparently abandoned. But something felt wrong. The second wave was supposed to be a cleanup operation, Vexther told the council, his voice heavy with regret. We thought we were chasing scattered refugees. Instead, we walked into the greatest military education program in galactic history. Transformation had been impossible to miss. During the first invasion, human weapons had been pathetic simple projectile guns that barely scratched Krillian armor. Their ships moved like floating rocks compared to Krillian vessels. Their communication systems were so primitive that intercepting them required no effort at all. But now, human broadcasts were encrypted with codes that took Krillian computers days to break. Their ships had somehow learned to mask their energy signatures, making them nearly invisible to long-range sensors. Most disturbing of all, their weapons had evolved. The first sign came during a routine patrol near Europa Station. Vexther continued. Lieutenant Nixvel reported that human fighters were using some kind of new propulsion system, instead of the chemical rockets we expected. They were moving with ion drives technology they shouldn't have possessed for another century. The patrol footage had been reviewed dozens of times. Human ships, sleek and deadly, dancing around Krillian fighters, with impossible agility. Where before human pilots had flown in straight lines like sitting targets, now they moved in complex patterns that suggested advanced tactical training. But the real shock came when we analyzed the wreckage. Vexther's 4 arms gestured to emphasize his point. Their weapons weren't just improved, they were revolutionary. Somehow they had created kinetic projectiles that could punch through our energy shields. The physics should have been impossible. Krillian shields had been perfected over thousands of years, designed to deflect or absorb any known form of energy weapon. But the humans had done something clever. They had studied the frequency patterns of Krillian shield generators from battlefield recordings and found the exact wavelength that would allow solid matter to pass through. A human named Minho had apparently led this development, Vexther explained. Our intelligence suggested he was once a civilian engineer, someone who designed construction equipment. But war had transformed him into a weapons genius. The evidence was everywhere once they knew what to look for. Human factories, once devoted to making simple tools and vehicles, had been converted into advanced weapons production facilities. They were manufacturing plasma generators using designs clearly copied from captured Krillian equipment, but improved with human innovation. Their manufacturing speed was terrifying, Vexer continued. What took our finest engineers months to design, they were producing in weeks, not because they were better engineers, but because they weren't starting from scratch. They were starting with our technology and making it better. The attack on Kepler 44 had been planned as a simple mop-up operation, intelligence reports showed that the human colony had been evacuated, leaving behind only empty buildings and abandoned infrastructure. Sub-Commander Kixra had taken a small force to secure the settlement and establish a forward base. The landing was textbook perfect, Vexler recalled. No resistance, no defensive fire, no signs of human presence. Kixra's forces spread out through the colony, checking buildings and setting up communication arrays, but the humans had been waiting. Every building in the settlement had been rigged with improvised explosive devices, created using salvaged Krillian plasma charges. The timing had been precise. The explosions were triggered only after Krillian forces had moved deep into the colony center, maximizing casualties. The blast was visible from orbit, Vexler's voice cracked. 17 of our finest warriors, gone in an instant. But that wasn't the worst part. In the aftermath, search teams had found something that chilled every Krillian soldier to their core, a series of video recordings left behind by the humans. The recordings showed a young human, male named Taiho, speaking directly to the camera in heavily accented but understandable Krillian. He thanked us, Vexer said, his voice barely above a whisper. This human, this Taiho, actually thanked our forces for providing them with advanced plasma technology, explained. Step by step, how they had reverse-engineered our weapons. From battlefield debris, the recording had been detailed and educational, almost like a technical manual. Taiho had shown viewers how human engineers had analyzed the molecular structure of Krillian plasma charges, how they had recreated the ignition sequences, how they had improved upon the original design to create more powerful explosives. But the most disturbing part, Vexer continued, was when he explained their strategy. The humans weren't fighting to win individual battles, or fighting to learn. Every engagement, every defeat, every casualty was part of a larger educational process. The recordings showed human soldiers deliberately exposing themselves to Krillian weapons fire, not out of bravery or desperation, but to gather data on weapon performance. They had sacrificed entire units to learn how Krillian tactics worked, then used that knowledge to develop countermeasures. They turned warfare into a science experiment, Vexler explained to the horrified council. Every battle was a laboratory. Every defeat was a lesson. They weren't trying to stop us, they were trying to understand us. The revelation had sent shockwaves through the Krillian command structure. For the first time in their military history, they were facing an enemy that grew stronger with each defeat. Traditional conquest strategies were useless against opponents who treated losses as learning opportunities. Admiral Zixtel ordered a full tactical review, Vexler continued. We changed our attack patterns, our weapon frequencies, our communication, protocols, but it didn't matter. Every change we made, the humans adapted to. It was like fighting an enemy that could see the future. Intelligence reports began flooding in from across human space. Factories were producing advanced spacecraft using hybrid human-Krillian technology. Training facilities were drilling human soldiers in tactics clearly copied from Krillian military manuals. Research centers were developing new weapons based on detailed analysis of Krillian equipment. The humans had turned their entire civilization into a military academy, Vexler said, his voice filled with grudging admiration. Children were learning advanced physics by studying our weapon systems. Engineers were earning promotions by improving upon our designs. Scientists were making breakthroughs by analyzing our failures. The final recording that Taiho had left behind was the most chilling. He had looked directly into the camera and spoken in perfect Krillian, his accent completely gone. Thank you for teaching us, he had said. Class dismissed. That was when I realized the terrible truth, Vexler concluded. We hadn't conquered the humans, we had educated them. And they had been excellent students. The first breach came on a quiet night shift aboard the battlecruiser Eternal Dominion. Communications Officer Tixra was monitoring routine fleet transmissions when a soft voice whispered through her headset in perfect Krillian. "Hello, Tixra. How is your sister Nixla doing on Krillos Prime?" Tixra ripped off her headset, her scales turning pale with shock. Her sister lived 3-star systems away on their homeworld, in a civilian district that had never been touched by war. No human should have known her name, let alone her location. "At first we thought it was coincidence," Vexter told the council, his voice trembling. It'd be lucky guesses or intercepted messages. But then the voices became more specific, more personal. They knew things that should have been impossible to discover. Psychological assault had started small. Random cum chatter would be interrupted by human voices speaking individual Krillian names. Soldiers would hear about their favorite foods, their childhood pets, their secret fears. The information was always accurate, always intimate, always delivered with calm politeness that made it even more terrifying. Captain Nixville had been leading a routine patrol when his personal communicator activated without authorization. A human female's voice, speaking flawless Krillian with the formal tones reserved for family conversations, began describing his mate's pregnancy in exact detail. She knew about the twin sons' mobile they had hung above the nursery, Vexter continued, his forearms shaking slightly. She described the exact shade of purple they had painted, the wall's morning sky purple, Nixville's favorite color from childhood. She even mentioned the lullabies his mate had been singing to their unborn offspring. The voice had belonged to someone calling herself Una. Intelligence reports suggested she was a former human linguist who had somehow gained access to Krillian military communication networks. But her knowledge went far beyond simple interception of messages. Una knew about Nixville's promotion ceremony from 20 years ago, Vexter explained. She described the speech his father had given, traditional food they had served, even the song his young nephew had performed, details that existed only in family memories and private recordings. The horror deepened when Engineer Dixman received a similar contact. While working on shield modifications in the engineering bay, his personal pad suddenly displayed a video message. A smiling human woman appeared on screen, speaking in his native dialect about his offspring's first words. She played recordings, Vexter. His voice dropped barely above a whisper. Actual audio of Dixman's child saying Papa for the first time. But those recordings had been made on Krillos Prime in his family's sealed residence, while he was serving in a war zone light years away. The implications were staggering. Humans had somehow penetrated Krillian civilian networks, infiltrated their homeworlds, and were conducting surveillance on military families. The technology required for such operations should have been centuries beyond human capability. But Una wasn't working alone, Vexter continued. Soon we began encountering others, human named Jinwoo, who knew about our military academy experiences, a female called Sahi, who could recite our childhood prayers. Each one demonstrated impossible knowledge of our personal lives. The psychological warfare escalated when a human named Kyun began broadcasting on official Krillian military frequencies. His transmissions weren't threats or demands for surrender. Instead, they were family videos featuring captured Krillian civilians. The first broadcast showed a group of children playing in what appeared to be a comfortable facility, Vexter explained. The children were healthy, well-fed, and seemed genuinely happy. But they were unmistakably Krillian young ones who had been aboard civilian transports captured during the early phases of the war. The children spoke directly to the camera, addressing their parents by name and rank. They described their daily activities, their lessons, their games. They seemed to be receiving excellent care, better treatment than many prisoners of war received from supposedly civilized species. A young female named Nix Seleng spoke directly to her father, Commander Ixcor of the Third Fleet, Vexter continued. She told him about her human teacher, about learning Earth languages, about the games she played with other Krillian children. She seemed happy. But then she asked when he was coming to take her home. The emotional impact on Krillian forces was devastating. Warriors who had fought without hesitation against armed enemies found themselves paralyzed by the thought of their own children asking why the war hadn't ended yet. Kyung's broadcasts weren't demands or ultimatums, Vexter explained. They were gentle suggestions. The children would mention how they missed their parents, how they hoped the fighting would stop soon so families could be reunited. No threats. No violence, just innocent voices asking for peace. But the most devastating broadcast came when Kyun featured elderly Krillian, civilians' grandparents, and retired veterans who had been aboard a diplomatic vessel captured near human space. They sat in comfortable chairs, speaking calmly about their treatment and expressing hope that their families were safe. An elder named Kixnara spoke directly to her grandson, Lieutenant Tixvel, Vexler recounted. She told him she was proud of his service, but worried about the dangers he faced. She asked him to be careful, to remember his training, and to come visit her when the war ended. The lieutenant had been reduced to tears in front of his entire unit. This was his beloved grandmother, the woman who had raised him after his parents died in an industrial accident. Seeing her as a prisoner of war, even a well-treated one, shattered his combat effectiveness. The humans weren't threatening our families, Vexter explained to the stunned council. They were demonstrating their reach. Every broadcast made it clear that they could access our most secure facilities, our most protected civilians, our most private moments. Morale across the Krillian fleet began to collapse. Soldiers started requesting transfers away from human combat zones. Officers reported nightmares about receiving messages from their captured family members. Some units simply refused orders to engage human forces. The final psychological blow came when Yuna made a fleet-wide broadcast. Vexter continued. She appeared on every screen in every ship simultaneously, overriding all security protocols. She spoke in the traditional formal style reserved for important announcements. Yuna had looked directly into the camera and addressed the entire Krillian, military by name, not just the officers, but individual soldiers, technicians, and support staff. She thanked them for their service to their people and expressed regret that circumstances had led to conflict. Then she did something unprecedented, Vexter said, his voice filled with awe and terror. She gave accurate casualty reports for every engagement we had fought, names, ranks, homeworlds, family survivors, information that should have been classified at the highest levels. The broadcast ended with Yuna expressing condolences to the families of fallen Krillian warriors and promising that their sacrifice would be remembered with honor. She spoke about each soldier as if she had known them personally, mentioning their achievements, their service records, their dreams for the future. She wasn't gloating about our losses, Vexter concluded. She was honoring our dead with more dignity than our own command structure had provided. And in doing so, she made it clear that humans knew everything about us, our strengths, our weaknesses, our fears, our hopes. The psychological warfare had achieved what no conventional weapon could. It had broken the Krillian military's will to fight. Soldiers who feared for their family's safety couldn't focus on combat. Officers who knew the enemy had detailed intelligence on their operations couldn't plan effective strategies. The humans had weaponized empathy, Vexter whispered to the council. They showed us that war didn't have to be about hatred or revenge. It could be about understanding your enemies so completely that resistance became pointless. The first sign of the change came during what should have been a routine patrol through the Vega sector. Commander Rick Stell was leading a squadron of 6 heavy fighters when his sensors detected something impossibly nothing. The space around them was completely empty according to every scanning device. Yet his veteran instincts screamed that they were being watched. "Contact!" his gunner suddenly shouted, but it was too late. A barrage of plasma fire erupted from seemingly empty space, destroying 2 fighters before they could even react. The attacking ship flickered into visibility for just a moment's leak, deadly and completely alien to any human design they had seen before. By the 4th year, we stopped being the hunters, Vexter told the council, his voice barely audible. We became the hunted, and humans, we discovered, were born predators. The transformation had been gradual, but terrifying. Early in the war, human ships had been easy targets, slow, predictable, and visible from vast distances. Their engines left heat signatures that could be tracked across star systems. Their communication arrays broadcast constantly, making them simple to locate and destroy. But now human vessels moved through space like ghosts. They had somehow developed cloaking technology that made them completely invisible to Kryllian sensors. Worse, they had learned to use the technology tactically, appearing and disappearing at will to strike from unexpected angles. The human named Jiwan appeared to be leading their technological development, Vexter continued. Intelligence suggested she had been a civilian scientist before the war, working on some kind of theoretical physics research. But war had transformed her into a master of stealth warfare. The evidence of human technological advancement was everywhere. Their ships now moved without detectable engine signatures, somehow manipulating space-time itself to achieve propulsion. Their weapons had evolved beyond simple kinetic projectiles to energy beams that seemed to bend around obstacles to strike targets. Lieutenant Nixara was commanding a patrol near the asteroid belt of the Centauri system, Vexter recounted. His sensors showed nothing unusual, just empty space and floating rocks. Then the asteroids started shooting back. The human ships had been hiding among the asteroids, their hulls disguised to look like ordinary space debris. They had waited patiently for the Kryllian patrol to move into the perfect position before revealing themselves. The attack had been swift and decisive. 3 Kryllian vessels destroyed before they could send a distress signal. But that was just the beginning. Vexter's voice grew darker. The humans had learned something we never expected. They had learned to hunt in packs. Battle Group Omega had been one of the Kryllian fleet's most formidable formations. 12 heavy cruisers, each capable of destroying a small moon, supported by dozens of escort vessels and fighter squadrons. They had been assigned to patrol the outer rim of human space, preventing any breakout attempts. The battle group's last transmission was routine, Vexter explained. Admiral Kixener reported all systems normal, no contacts detected. Proceeding according to schedule. Then, silence. Search and rescue operations had been launched immediately, but they found nothing. No debris fields, no distress beacons, no trace of what had happened to over 10,000 Kryllian warriors. It was as if the entire battle group had simply vanished from existence. 3 months later, a civilian mining ship found them. Vexter's voice cracked with emotion. The wreckage was arranged in perfect formation in an empty star system, 50 light-years from their last known position. The debris had been carefully organized to spell out a single word in human script: surrender. Each letter was formed from the wreckage of Kryllian ships, positioned with mathematical precision. The message was impossible to miss and impossible to misunderstand. But what terrified us most wasn't the destruction, Vexter continued. It was the precision. Every ship had been disabled with surgical strikes to their reactor cores. No unnecessary damage, no random destruction. The humans had eliminated Battle Group Omega with the efficiency of a professional extermination service. Intelligence reports began flooding in about a human commander named Dong Ho. Unlike the psychological warfare, Specialist Dong Ho was apparently a pure military tactician who had studied Kryllian fleet movements for years. His ghost fleets appeared throughout Kryllian space, striking with devastating effectiveness before vanishing without a trace. Dong Ho's tactics were unlike anything we had encountered, Vexter explained. He didn't fight fair battles or engage in honorable combat. He hunted isolated ships, ambushed supply convoys, and struck at our weakest points with overwhelming force. The pattern became terrifyingly predictable. Kryllian vessels would receive routine patrol assignments, report normal conditions, and then simply disappear. Sometimes wreckage would be found arranged in human words. Sometimes ships would be discovered intact but empty, their crews missing without signs of struggle. Admiral Zixtel's flagship, the Voidrender, was destroyed while in the center of a defensive formation. Vexter's voice trembled. Surrounded by escort vessels, protected by overlapping shield grids, it should have been invulnerable. The attack had come from directly above the formation, an angle that should have been covered by sensor arrays and defensive weapons. A single human ship had materialized out of nowhere, fired one devastating salvo directly into the flagship's command section, and vanished before the escort vessels could react. Admiral Zixtel had commanded fleets for 40 years. continued he had conquered 17 star systems. But this human ship killed him in less than 30 seconds, and disappeared like it had never existed. The most chilling aspect of the attack was its timing. Intelligence later revealed that 17 similar strikes had occurred simultaneously across different star systems, each one targeting a high-ranking Krillian officer. The coordination required for such an operation suggested that humans had developed near-instantaneous communication across galactic distances. A human ship would appear, destroy its target with a single precise strike, and vanish, Vexler explained. No prolonged battles, no dramatic confrontations. Just swift, efficient elimination of Krillian assets. The psychological impact on surviving Krillian forces was devastating. Soldiers began refusing deep space assignments, knowing they might simply disappear without a trace. Officers stopped making detailed patrol schedules, fearing that human intelligence networks were monitoring their every move. We tried everything, Vexler continued. Random patrol patterns, communication blackouts, decoy formations, nothing worked. The humans seemed to know where we were going before we did. Supply lines began to collapse as transport vessels refused to travel through areas where human ghost fleets had been sighted. Military bases reported shortages of everything from ammunition to food supplies. The mighty Krillian war machine was grinding to a halt, not from direct assault, but from systematic disruption of its logistics. The humans had turned space itself into their weapon, Vexler explained to the horrified council. They could appear anywhere, strike anyone, and vanish without consequence. We were no longer fighting an enemy, we were being hunted by predators, who had mastered our own environment better than we had. The final blow came when human forces began capturing Krillian territories without firing a shot. Garrison commanders would receive messages offering safe passage off-world in exchange for peaceful withdrawal. Most accepted, knowing that resistance would likely result in their forces simply disappearing one by one. Within months, our empire had shrunk from 300 worlds to less than 50, Vexler concluded. Not through massive battles or heroic last stands, but through systematic elimination of our ability to project power. The humans had learned that the most effective way to win a war was to make it impossible for the enemy to fight. The reversal was complete. The Krillian Empire, once the dominant military force in the galaxy, had been reduced to a defensive coalition, desperately trying to protect their remaining worlds from an enemy they could no longer see coming. We had become the prey, Vexler whispered, and the humans had become the perfect predators. The War Council chamber that had once echoed with the roars of conquest now filled with the silence of defeat. Vexler looked around at the faces of his fellow commanders, beings who had once struck fear into entire star systems, now reduced to shadows of their former selves. The holographic displays that surrounded them told the brutal truth. The mighty Krillian Empire had been reduced to a handful of core worlds, desperately trying to protect what little remained of their once vast domain. The message arrived 3 days ago, Vexler continued, his voice heavy with the weight of inevitability. It bypassed every security protocol we had, appearing simultaneously on every command screen in our remaining fleet. The human leader, someone called Jimin, spoke to us in perfect High Krillian, the ceremonial language reserved for our most sacred rituals. The message had been unlike anything the Krillians had expected. No demands for unconditional surrender, no threats of annihilation, no gloating about their victories. Instead, Jimin had spoken with the calm professionalism of a corporate negotiator discussing a business merger. He offered us terms, Vexler explained, his forearms trembling slightly. Reasonable terms. Complete withdrawal from all human claimed territories, reparations for the initial attacks on their worlds, and a non-aggression pact guaranteeing the security of our remaining systems. The terms were so generous that many council members had initially suspected a trap. Victorious species typically demanded tribute, slaves, or territorial concessions that would cripple their defeated enemies for generations. But the humans seemed genuinely interested in simply ending the conflict with minimal further bloodshed. But the most shocking part wasn't the terms themselves, Vexler continued. It was how they were delivered. The Krillian High Command had been meeting in the Obsidian Fortress, a military installation buried 3 kilometers beneath the surface of their homeworld. The facility was protected by energy shields, automated defense systems, and an entire army of elite guards. It was supposed to be the most secure location in Krillian space. The meeting was interrupted when our security sensors detected an unauthorized presence in the main corridor, Vexther recounted. A single human female had somehow penetrated every layer of our defenses without triggering a single alarm. The woman had identified herself as Sujin, a diplomatic representative of the human government. She walked through the fortress corridors, as if she belonged there, nodding politely to stunned guards who found themselves unable to raise their weapons against someone who showed no signs of hostility. She knew the layout of our most classified facility better than some of our own officers, Vexter continued. She walked directly to the council chamber, past automated gun turrets that somehow failed to recognize her as a threat, through security doors that opened at her approach. When Sujin entered the chamber, she had carried no weapons, shown no fear, and made no threatening gestures. She simply placed a datapad on the conference table and explained that it contained detailed surrender terms, along with comprehensive intelligence files demonstrating the extent of human knowledge about Krillian military capabilities. The files were impossible, Vexter's voice cracked. Complete technical specifications for our most advanced weapons. Detailed maps of our remaining military installations, personal profiles of every officer, above the rank of sub-commander. They knew everything about us. But more disturbing than the intelligence itself was how the humans had gathered it. The files showed evidence of infiltration operations that had been ongoing for years, conducted by agents who had somehow learned to pass as Krillians in their own society. A human named Sunjay had apparently been living on Krylos Prime for 2 years, Vexter explained. He had worked as a military contractor, providing technical services to our fleet command. His colleagues remembered him as a talented engineer who had helped improve several of our weapon systems. The revelation that humans had been walking among them, studying their technology and tactics from within their own military structure, sent shockwaves through the remaining Krillian leadership. How many other human agents were still in place? How much of their supposed military secrets had been compromised? But Sunjay hadn't just been gathering intelligence, Vexter continued. Our war effort, equipment failures that we had attributed to battle damage had actually been caused by subtle modifications to critical systems. The scope of human infiltration was staggering. It placed agents in weapons factories, communication centers, training facilities, and research laboratories. Every aspect of the Krillian war machine had been compromised by beings who could blend seamlessly into their society. Sujin explained that humans had been preparing for this war since the day we first attacked Earth, Vexter recounted. While we celebrated our easy victories, they were studying us, learning from us, and positioning themselves to strike back when the time was right. The human diplomatic representative had then done something unprecedented. She had offered to demonstrate human military capabilities by providing a live tactical display. With the Council's permission, she activated a holographic projector that showed real-time positions of all remaining Krillian military assets. Every ship, every base, every patrol was displayed with perfect accuracy, Vexter continued. But then she showed us something else. The positions of human forces. They were everywhere, surrounding our worlds, shadowing our fleets, positioned to strike at targets we thought were completely secure. The display revealed that humans had achieved complete tactical superiority throughout what remained of Krillian space. Their invisible fleets could strike any target at any time. While Krillian forces remained essentially blind to human movements, she offered us a choice, Vex explained to the stunned council. Accept the surrender terms and withdraw peacefully, or face complete annihilation within the next 72 hours.